Right, good evening. Welcome to the executive for today. Apologies for absence. John Kaiser. Pardon me, Jim? I didn't say anything of importance. Is that better? Is that better? Fine. I didn't say anything of importance, Jim, so anyway. I was just apologising from John Kaiser, but everybody has to apologise for John Kaiser. Minutes of the previous meeting. Anything to Charles?
Thank you. I wanted to ask, there's page 13, there's a note halfway down. Wanted to ask Councillor Clark. Councillor Kaiser advised that the schools block had a variance of 1.05 million. Obviously, there have been lots of newspaper stories this week about Northern House and the unfortunate events there. I wanted to ask what effect that has on this.
Can you hear me? Yes, good. So there are 70 children presently at Northern House, of which 38 are children from our borough. And we pay for each placement £30,000 plus, which is normal. That's what most local authority would pay. So our financial commitment to Northern House is around £1.2 million.
Any other questions? Can I take the minutes as read then? Anybody propose them? Parry, second. Stewart. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? Charlotte?
Thank you. I'd like to declare a personal interest in item number 18, the Berkshire Local Industrial Strategy Framework Consultation Document, as I'm a LEP non-executive director. Thank you.
Public question time. I guess the first one is from you, Charles, actually. Isn't it? What?
Andrew Grimes.
Where are they? I'm sorry, Andrew. I'll get the hang of this eventually. Maybe.
I too am new to leadership. Good evening, Chair, Committee. Shinfield Parish Council's Planning Committee of the 6th of June this year received an update on planning enforcement in the parish. The list consisted of 19 breaches. Of these, 2 had reached the stage of a planning enforcement notice being issued, and 1 had been closed due to submission of a planning application. A review of the list demonstrated that all 19 breaches have been in existence for considerable periods of time. For example, Derrydene 84951, or had not been inspected for a long period after a complaint had been made. And in the case of enforcement item 1402, Mallards, Spencer's Wood Post Office, enforcement was granted due to the applicant's failed appeal at planning, and yet officers continue to negotiate with the owner, who is delaying conforming with the actual permission granted, with no relief in sight for the neighbours. These processes do not seem to result in any progress to rectify breaches of planning permissions. Can the Executive confirm the key performance indicators for managing planning enforcement issues and the criteria for screening out complaints? Thank you.
Evening, Andrew, and congratulations on being chair of Shinfield Parish Council. I'm sure we will get to see each other a lot in the future. The Council's local planning enforcement plan prioritises alleged breaches of planning control in high, medium and low categories. The document can be found on the Council's website. The list of 18 cases, not 19 as stated, outstanding in Shinfield are all medium or low priority, which means that which means the complainant will get an initial response within 10 working days or 28 days respectively. In the listed cases, this has occurred. The Parish Council has not contacted the enforcement team to our knowledge at any stage asking for an update on the particular case. The Council currently has 261 enforcement cases on hand, distributed mainly between 3 officers. There is a target of 60% to close cases within 8 weeks, and this is normally exceeded. There are those cases that end up with formal enforcement notice, which is being served, and they sometimes go to appeal or end up in court. Now turning to the details in the question. On review of the list of the 18 outstanding cases, 3 or 5 may be closed as they have now been resolved. Derry Dean has been passed to the current officer, and unfortunately the previous officer retired, unfortunately, probably fortunately for him. A site visit is planned, but due to annual sickness, this has not been undertaken. But looking at the Google Maps and area photographs, it does appear that this site has existed for some time, but we're taking further action on that. Now, item 1402, Mallard's enforcement. Having looking at that last week and trying to get a better understanding of it, myself and local councillor Monroe, spent most of yesterday morning with residents, both sides, and the owner of the property. This is quite a complex case, and I don't think, even in my working life, I've ever seen anything as complex as this case. I genuinely think that we can get a resolution, having spoken to residents, as I said, on either side, and the owner of the one-stop shop, stroke post office, stroke his own property. And myself and Councillor Monroe have agreed to work with the owner of the property to the satisfaction of the residents either side to come to a resolution. But it is, Andrew, quite difficult. And as I said, I've never seen anything like it. And it's complex, but we will get a resolution that satisfies the residents.
So can I just ask that you mentioned that you were not aware of Parish Council commentary to the enforcement process. Would officers be prepared to increase the rating through discussion with the Parish Council? You mentioned that we only had medium and low criticality items. 1402 strikes me as slightly worse than medium or low, and perhaps didn't bag the level of response that we needed. So my supplementary question is, would officers be willing to review the criticality of these issues so that we can be assured that they are being treated with the appropriate level of performance?
I'm absolutely sure we will, because Jason Varley, who heads up that team, came with us yesterday to meet the residents, and he also understands the complex nature of this one. But you know, I absolutely think if we're not working with the parish councils, it's going to make our life twice as hard. So yes.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you. I wanted to ask my colleague Parry basically to update us on progress with the ongoing work at California Country Park.
Thank you, Charles. Yes, I can happily report that work is progressing fast on improving California Country Park to provide excellent facilities for our residents, and the project is ready to open for the summer holidays. So we have improved car park layout. There's a series of paragolas providing all-weather outdoor seating under cover for the cafe. And there's a new road to provide better access for all the vehicles. Also, the next phase we will have a new play area and additional toilets by spring 2020.
Thank you. That's obviously all good news. And can you tell us how this will be communicated to residents? We're now moving into the summer, the busiest months of the year, when people want to obviously use this community resource.
Thanks, Giles. I think if you open the Borough News, page 16, there is a mention in there, but we will need to have more stuff on the social media as well as press releases to keep everybody informed.
So 40 councils across Britain, including Reading, have recently declared a climate emergency. Does your newly created role mean that Wokingham is joining with the other councils and their climate change initiatives? And if so, what can we expect in the coming months that will help stem the tide of climate change and improve the environment for all our residents?
Well, firstly, I'll say thank you, Ula Karim, for being the first person to ask me a question in this forum. It's nice to finally be up and running. So John Halsall started the process of declaring a climate emergency with his maiden speech as leader of the council on May 22nd. Following on from that speech, the council has been preparing a formal motion declaring a climate emergency, which will be brought forward for a vote of the full council at its next meeting on July 19th. To support our ambition of being carbon neutral by 2030, over the next 6 months, we'll be working to develop a climate emergency action plan. This is a key part of which will be to understand exactly what our current carbon footprint is and identify measures either to reduce or offset our carbon emissions. A partnership group will also be set up to help monitor the progress in achieving this ambition. The Wokingham Borough Climate Emergency Action Plan, which is a bit of a mouthful, we may try and find a better name for it, will look at all actions and opportunities available to help us reduce our carbon emissions and address climate change. And I'm particularly keen to ask our residents, our businesses, our charities, our schools for their thoughts and ideas on how we tackle this most important of issues. These will then be carefully considered and the most appropriate will be actioned. I'd also like to add that Wokingham Borough Council is already undertaking some bold and highly successful initiatives for helping address climate change. The food waste recycling scheme has just collected its 1,000th tonne. There are programmes in place for reducing the amount of energy that our own council uses across its estate, and we have many sustainable development and transport policies already in place. All of these, coupled with the update to the local plan to include even more sustainability policies and targets, will help us to take steps to reduce our carbon emissions and reach our carbon neutral goal. Although this is a global issue, local actions do matter. Wokingham Borough Council is already demonstrating that we take our environmental responsibility seriously, and the Climate Emergency Declaration is a further proof of this. We call on all members, regardless of political party, to vote to support this crucial motion and ask all residents to contribute as we work towards effecting positive change with this stretching, ambitious but essential objective.
Thank you very much. It's obviously very important that we communicate this to all our residents. So what have you planned to ensure we reach them all?
It's a very good follow-up question. So David Allen and his team have already started working on some environmental communication initiatives. You'll have already seen on things like social media a lot of communication around the food waste recycling and some of the other initiatives that are going on. When we go to residents to ask them for their opinion, we will be conducting, I don't like using the word survey, but something along those lines, asking residents for their ideas, and they will then be brought to a forum to be considered. And we're hoping to partner with some of our esteemed newspapers to be able to communicate those surveys and those results and the actions that we take as a result.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to it.
Raquel?
Could you please give me the reason for the delay of, actually it's 3 years now, not 2, in the design of a zebra crossing on Bearwood Road and New Road in Winnish, which has outside funding, which may actually expire by the time we actually get a design for it. And the lowering of the speed limit to 30 miles per hour on Bearwood Road required outside Bearwood Road for primary.
Thanks, Michelle. I can't speak for the last 3 years, but recently, as a result of the change in highways contract, non-urgent projects such as the requested crossing have not progressed as quickly as they should have done. Now the new contract's in place, work is progressing in the design of the crossing. This will form part of a wider package of measures across the borough. We'll inform you of the programme of works as soon as possible. And that actually includes some double yellow lines that need to be replacing as well, which are in plan now as well. In respect to the requested reduced speed limit at Bearwood Road, our investigation has found that without traffic calming measures, the police won't enforce a reduced 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Such measures can't be achieved within the current regulations given the alignment and rural character of Bearwood Road and the number and proximity of private driveways and only partial street lighting. Whilst it's not possible to reduce the speed limit on the road, the council has undertaken measures such as junction warning signs, slow road markings and the current 40-mile-an-hour speed limit, which has been effective in reducing vehicle speeds. We've also been working with the parish council on speed surveys, and we will be doing. We're also doing community speed watch initiatives with the parish council. I do acknowledge residents' concerns and have asked officers to make sure they continually monitor the speeds on Bearwood Road and pursue measures should there be any deterioration in safety.
First of all, 30 mile per hour is required for a zebra crossing. You must have a speed limit of 30 miles per hour or less on the road to have a zebra crossing in the first place. And second of all, the police won't enforce a 40 mile per hour limit. They won't enforce a 50 mile per hour limit. They won't enforce a 60 mile per hour limit. If you've seen a policeman actually doing that, I'd be very surprised. But my real question is, what will happen, or what's your opinion of the government trying to reduce the cost of zebra crossings from between 50 and 70,000 pounds as it is right now to a cost of around 300 pounds by eliminating Belisha beacons?
I've not come across that government policy at all, so I can't really comment on it. The Borough Council has been quite assiduous in putting proper crossings with proper pelican controls in, and that's all we can speak for. I can't speak for the government. Regarding the speed limits, I understand what you're saying about the police not enforcing quite a lot of speed limits. I drive up and down Bearwood Road a bit, actually, at school times, and I must say I've never managed to do more than 5 miles an hour during the school delivery time because of the amount of traffic and the fact that half the road is usually blocked up by parents dropping their kids off. So I understand what you're saying. We'll keep an eye on it, and if I can think of anything else more to do to deal with speeding outside school drop-off times, I'll be happy to do it.
Thank you. As a totally new member, reading some of the excellent questions and answers from previous meetings has provided me with a valued source of information to help me understand personally what WBC are doing across a range of issues. However, as soon as it becomes happy to talk after, happy to give further details, happy to look into this, happy to share, happy to have a conversation, all those happies were in the annual general meeting. The annual meeting in the minutes from the previous meeting. It becomes a one-to-one conversation with the visibility of the answers, the ideas, the options, and importantly, the actions, and the follow-ups are lost to the wider audience. This is mainly on supplementary questions, but not always. There have also been some rare occasions where answers are subsequently proven to be factually incorrect, and any challenge is actually difficult to see. I believe there would be benefit to residents, members, in a cross-party review of how we manage questions, subsequent actions and resultant challenges. Will the executive support setting up a cross-party working group to review this issue?
Jim, welcome. I couldn't agree more. We have a body which is called the Constitutional Review Working Group, which is a cross-party group and I propose to put your question to them to see whether the constitution is to be amended to include that. And you're very welcome to attend that meeting.
Thank you. So instead of a supplementary question, can I just make a statement? And that's a thank you on behalf of all the new members, because I'm not the only one, to the officers and to the existing members for actually making us welcome and actually helping us to get started. So thank you.
Thank you. Smith?
Hello. I would like to ask the new executive member for climate change, do we have a planning policy concerning building specific percentage of carbon neutral homes in any new development in the future? And if not, when we'll have a policy on what will the percentages be? I won't read the bit about the definition of carbon zero. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Caroline, for your question. I really appreciate it. The good news is that actually we've already got some policies in place that do make a requirement on development proposals around environmental issues. So policy CP1, which was part of our 2010 core strategy, already states in line 12 or paragraph 12 that new developments contribute towards the goal of reaching zero carbon developments as soon as possible by A, including appropriate on-site renewable energy features, and B, minimizing energy and water consumption by measures including the use of appropriate layout and orientation, building form, design and construction, and design to take into account microclimate so as to minimize carbon dioxide emissions through giving careful consideration to how all aspects of development form. In addition, we already have policy CC04, the Sustainable Design and Construction Policy, and policy CC05, the Renewable Energy and Decentralized Energy Networks of our managing development delivery. These policies require residential and commercial development in the borough to introduce measures to contribute towards carbon reduction. The other piece of good news is that we are currently undergoing an update to our local plan. And in that, we have an opportunity to include specific carbon reduction and sustainability targets. This is currently being worked on by our officers and will be put to consultation later in this autumn. We welcome any ideas or initiatives that help us to achieve our objective of carbon neutral by 2030. Clearly, housing and housing development is going to be a big part of that. And we welcome any further ideas and suggestions that you may have to help feed into that local plan and into other areas of cutting our carbon footprint.
Thank you. That'd be lovely. And yes, I would like to take part. Can I just ask a couple of questions? You didn't mention percentages on new developments. Is that 100% homes, you hope, or and also public buildings that we're going to build in the future? Are we going to aim for carbon neutral with schools and things?
So I may need to refer you to my colleague in terms of planning for those specifics, because clearly that falls under Wayne's remit rather than mine specifically. But my personal hope is that the amended local plan will include some very specific targets around carbon neutral homes as we work towards that plan of being carbon neutral by 2030.
Thank you.
Having spent most of my last 15 years in working for an energy company, working in new housing, it is very difficult. You follow national policy. There used to be the thing called the Merton Rule, which gave you 10%, and then we had the Code for Sustainable Homes, and you follow national guidance. And on every application, you as Wokingham Borough and as the Planning Committee, you work to the legislation that's in front of you. I mean, one of the jobs that we've got to do as a local council is try to inform the National Council on some of the policies that we're trying to implement here. But developers will always apply national policy. And it's not going to be easy, but it's going to be a challenge that we're going to have to take and work with developers, especially as we work through the local plan, in building above those standards. Because you've probably heard that the government is working towards zero carbon homes by 2030. Now, zero carbon homes by 2030 really means that you'll be supplying energy off-grid. So the days of gas boilers will have gone. And so you'll be relying on ground source, air source, solar panels to deliver those. Now, all of that technology isn't there today. It's there as a cottage industry, and people think that it's there and they're in mass production, but they're not. There's a lot of work that needs to go into the whole supply chain before that occurs in 2030. So the challenge for us is, especially in the local plan, is making sure that we get a lot more of those new technologies into the plan, which encourages new developments to take place. But as I said, it's not going to be easy, and the best you can get is to say that all new homes from 2030 will be zero carbon. The biggest challenge is retrofit.
Yeah, thank you.
It is not easy.
No.
That's even worse.
Rachel?
Hello. I was concerned to see the plans for the conversion of another office block on the Townley Road Industrial Estate into residential housing. I've walked around the existing office conversion on the same estate. The problems with this form of housing are immediately obvious from a quick visit. These are not purpose-built apartments constructed as housing. It's an office block divided into living spaces. Residents' privacy is compromised, there's no garden space, and the block is isolated on an industrial estate. This is going to magnify the effects of any antisocial behaviour which starts in flats on the rest of those living there. I understand we have a housing crisis nationally, and this development is a roof over people's heads, but it is not the kind of suitable permanent housing which will help build strong communities. It's not somewhere that people will choose to settle down and raise a family. In fact, similar developments elsewhere have been linked to increases in antisocial behaviour and crime. What steps is the Council taking to ensure that Woking is building housing which is suitable for the long term?
Thank you. I also share your concerns. Unfortunately, as you're probably aware, not all new developments, and especially where we're changing from office blocks, you take Townley Road as a good example, they don't need planning permission. Under the national guidance, there is what is referred to as a prior approval, but they automatically have planning permission. And the only areas that the council can look at, even if you referred it to the planning committee, it would be the same, are areas such as flooding, contamination, highways, and the impacts of noise from nearby commercial premises on the intended occupiers of the development. The council is not allowed to attend and look at other matters such as quality of accommodation in terms of size and availability of amenity space. I agree with you, it's not right, but that's national planning guidance. Sometimes where we are in control, and I think most of us would agree that what we've built in Woking is to a very high standard, and we've seen that through the new home survey that we commission every year, and through the feedback that we've had through the local update that we've done for the local plan. But it's a national issue, and it's not just happening in Wokingham. I think Reading is suffering from it far much than Wokingham, because they've got a lot more offices that are being converted, but it's nothing we can do about it as it currently stands under the national planning policy.
Thanks. Can I ask a supplementary? As long as we fail to build enough affordable housing, we will continue to see lower earners being pushed into this kind of unsuitable housing, which doesn't even provide SIL money for the community. There was no affordable housing built on the Elms Field development. There's none planned for the Carnival Pool site. There are a few key worker homes on Peach Place, which have no parking and are below the standards we would expect from a private developer. Phoenix Place replaced existing affordable homes with newer affordable homes, but fewer of them. The existence of very low quality housing in Woking demonstrates that we're not providing enough homes for our lower earners. What are the council's plans for ensuring that enough homes are built for low and medium earner families?
I think there is a lot of questions there, and if Councillor Kaiser was here, I think he would give you a much better answer than I would on housing and what his plans are with our housing companies, etc. We always try to get 35% affordable when we're in any development. Sometimes that's not achievable, and we try to get other areas through commuted sums. But in the specifics, I think we need to give you a much more detailed answer, and the best way to do that is if I get John Kaiser to give you a written answer. Is that okay?
Great.
Is that right?
Thanks very much.
Rachel, it might be good if we could have a copy of the text of that question, or Anne Hunter. Anne Hunter could, because it was quite a book.
Impacts on the travelling public and adjacent residents by flooding their gardens, and has now occurred 39 times since March 2018. In his response, the executive member agreed to an on-site meeting with myself and local residents. In an email exchange on the 1st of April 2019, it was agreed to meet soon after the CCTV survey results were available, within a couple of weeks. However, following being elected to this council, and I found that no CCTV survey has been carried out, and there are still flooding events taking place impacting on residents. Another 3 months lost due to the inefficiency of this council. What urgent action is the executive member going to take to expedite resolving this long-standing issue?
Paul, I've only just taken this role on, so I think the previous discussions were with my previous the exec member for the environment. However, thank you for your question. And yes, I think I agree with you. There is a problem there, which needs to be resolved. Following that executive meeting, 28th of March, officers did respond quite quickly by visiting the affected area. Detailed investigation by the officers revealed that the problem is caused by Sainsbury's private drainage system, which is connected to the highways drainage system. When the system is full, Sainsbury's empty that system, and that tends to lead to water overwhelming the highways drainage system, and hence the flooding. Officers met Sainsbury officers in April 2019, and it became apparent that there was a problem with one of the drainage pumps. That was replaced and fixed, and there were no further flooding reported, and as such, no CCTV survey was commissioned by the council. However, 11th of June, officers once again received complaints from the residents of further flooding. And I believe there was a meeting arranged for 17th of June between yourself and Councillor Dubey. Well, did that take place? I'm not sure.
The 17th of June was an officer meeting, and this is when I found out about no CCTV had taken place at all.
However, I was told that that was to discuss a potential solution. But moving forward, we will be carrying out dye testing, CCTV, and jetting works in the location, and staff have re-engaged with Sainsbury's in a faint hope to achieve a solution for this problem. So watch this space.
Supplementary, Paul.
Yes, I do.
Could I just ask you in your questions? I think it's sort of strange, unparliamentary language due to the inefficiency of the council. We don't normally criticise officers in these meetings.
I am not criticising officers, I'm criticising the process which has happened, because this has been going on for an awful long time, as I said. No CCTV surveys have been undertaken, which was promised, and it's only since I've been elected I've found this out, and it was following a meeting on the 17th of June with the officer that I found out there was no CCTV. As I stated at the executive meeting in March, I had reported this last year in June and again in November, but this is, I'm now going into my supplementary, John.
Like a book?
No, it's not a book. No, it's a very short story, but a very, unfortunately, sad situation. As I said, I reported this back in June last year and again in November. I had lots of evidence, but sadly nobody would come and talk to me at all because I knew where the flooding was coming from. And if it wasn't for my intervention on the 17th of June, this serious matter of flooding would have continued because no action, no proper action was taking place. So what measures will the executive member put in place to ensure that when reported incidents such as this are submitted either by councillors or by residents, they're actually taken seriously and actioned urgently, because they clearly haven't been in this particular instance?
I'll answer that on behalf of the executive member. Every complaint that you give to officers is treated seriously, and it's wrong to assume that they don't. The assumption was that that flooding occurrence had not occurred again, and therefore the problem was fixed, which is awful. Where in a lot of cases of flooding, that's the case. So I think you're wrong in that assumption that your complaints are not taken seriously. But you had your supplementary question. Thank you very much, Paul.
If I could just say, please, John, on the 28th of March 2019, I had reported then, okay, there was 22 instances in flooding when I wrote that question. That is now 39. And these are not little floods. These are floods that cover the whole of the carriageway and go over the footway and into people's gardens. They flood everywhere. And it was not taken seriously at all. Nobody came back to me at all. You promised me that CCTV was going to take place and the surveys would be undertaken and then we would meet. And nothing was undertaken. And flooding still continued. That's the process I'm talking about. It is not working.
I take your point. Thank you. Charles. Payson. Oh, sorry.
Questions to Charles. Whilst we agree with the proposals for this item when we're talking about the adult social care, which is agenda item 15, plus we do not wish to delay the implementation of the recommendations, we have severe concerns about the impact of how the structure of Woking Borough Council adult services in relation to Optilis has got into this position, plus we have concerns how it will interface in the future. Safeguarding is an issue that impacts all councillors on Woking Borough Council. We therefore believe that there needs to be a major investigation into this area. Will you support the implementation of a specific task and finish group to look at these issues arising from how we got to where we are and how this change could impact the interface and working between Woking Borough Council and Optilis in the future?
Thank you for your question. I'm pleased that your group is inclined to support the proposal. I also welcome your statement that you will not seek to delay these changes. However, as we've had written correspondence about, I do not believe a task and finish group is necessary in this situation. I've committed to you in writing and to Councillor Croy, and I will commit to you in public that I will continue to keep you all informed of the progress of these changes. I think it's important generally that all our efforts are focused on improving things for our residents, for the vulnerable adults in our care, and that our staff have the correct and the most efficient structures, processes and systems to do this. And this is what the change proposed is seeking to address. I think generally, again, as I've briefed yourself and Councillor Croy, we're looking at the structure of Optilis to ensure it can adapt to the ever and fast-moving pace of change with the environment in adult services. We're in the process of putting in place new directors. These changes will take a couple of months to be put in place, and at that point I'll be happy to update you, Councillor Croy, and the independents on progress. I would state that Optalis is rated as good, outstanding by the CQC in its Wokingham Care Services, and I would say, in my opinion, this is a fantastic achievement. This is a credit to the leadership and the staff of Optalis, so I know work very hard to achieve this. Optalis will continue to provide care and support services for Wokingham Borough residents as it does now. The main reason for this change is principally to tidy up the statutory controls. We believe that if we bring these under our direct control, we'll be able to improve performance, quality of the service generally, which is a benefit to all our residents. Also, in an environment where the pace of change is ever quickening, we'll be able to transact quicker response to statutory services going forwards, as we'll have direct control. As discussed at the meeting, when I briefed yourself, Councillor Croy, these changes require no additional capital and any costs will be completely absorbed in the current budget. Demand for adult services has notably increased over the last 12 to 18 months. It's important basically that we continue to take steps to ensure the service, the costs of it are very tightly controlled, and we're always working to try and improve the quality for the best interests of our residents.
Supplementary. Also at the same meeting, it was indicated that the reason for the change was that the current system was generating an element of stalling of the processes and that the time taken to get through the system had increased to 16 weeks. And I think safeguarding is a very serious issue and it affects all councillors, as I mentioned. Do you think you are being complacent in not accepting such a working group?
Thank you for your question. The answer is no. You wrote to me about this, obviously. I responded with my decision. You asked me to reconsider. I did contemplate and reconsider. You've subsequently been in contact, I believe, with the leader and the chief exec of the council, and they have advised, as I did at the time, basically that if you don't agree with my decision, that's fine. I respect your opinion. But the correct way to go about that is to take this to overview and scrutiny and ask them to review the past history of the company, the structures, the way it's been set up and the performance. I think all of us, whether it's myself, whether it's you, basically whether it's other members, whether it's basically journalists, think about what we say and the impact it has on the staff who work hard for us and also the adults in our care. I think myself and the new DAS, basically I come from a private sector background. I've always worked for small to medium-sized companies. There, if you don't improve the quality of what you do, you get overtaken, basically, and you lose business. I'm trying to bring that principle to what I'm doing here to try and drive up the quality of everything we do. I know the new DAS basically shares my opinion entirely. I think my view would be basically that residents looking in on me and what I'm doing would want me to be focused on things going forward and driving up the standards, basically, because we are caring for some of the most vulnerable people in our community. So I respect your opinion. Basically, I don't agree with you, basically, but that's kind of where we are. Thank you. So page 17 in the agenda, which is what we were just discussing, basically, to a degree. This is a report, basically, on some changes planned to adult social care and the relationship between the council and Optalis, the company, basically, who deal with it. And the basic function of this report is to bring the statutory services all under one roof. The reason for doing this, basically, is there's currently a split pathway. So some parts are dealt with by Optalis, some parts are dealt with by Wokingham Borough Council. We believe, as I've said, that bringing these changes all under one roof will give our officers direct control, will enable us to transact change quicker and to drive up the standards of what we do. So I'm looking to take any questions and ask my colleagues if they will support this measure.
One question on my behalf. It's been reported on some aspects of the press that the whole of Optilis is now being absorbed into Wokingham Borough Council, or reabsorbed. Can you confirm that that is not correct?
I can completely confirm that's not correct. You know, we are fully committed to Optilis and to it continuing these functions. What's happening is we're bringing the statutory part, which is shared, under our direct control. I'd also, now you mentioned the press, there was a newspaper headline in the Bracknell Times which referred to our view of this system as inefficient, and that's simply not the case. I think our staff work very hard for us and in Optilis, and you know, I thank them for everything they do.
Can you confirm that, in your view, Optilis is a very good company?
I do take that view. I mean, but I would say don't take my word for it. The CQC basically rates Optilis as good to excellent. And I think they're in a better place than me to actually pass judgment on its services.
What we're really doing is just a small change to get the safeguarding of our adults.
Agreed. It's a tidy up, basically, of what basically... Again, coming back to what I said before, you know, I've always believed if you see a situation where there's an obvious change which can be made, which is going to have an immediate improvement on services, make life easier for the staff, then you should make it. But it's an administrative thing which will help the people in our care, improve our services, and make life easier for our staff.
Thank you. Obviously, it takes a bit of time to move staff over from a company back into WBC. How quickly do you think this will take, and how quickly do you think we'll see an impact on the service for our most vulnerable residents?
It's my understanding that the change will take about 3 months. Most of that is dealing with, there are some slight differences in terms and conditions which have to be dealt with. I would hope that we're seeing immediate improvements within 6 months. But you know, we'll continue to monitor that change. And I would say again, you know, I've committed to the opposition, all members of the opposition, basically, that will keep everybody fully updated going forwards. I would also mention basically that, you know, the officers have asked for an independent peer review to come in September to make sure that the changes we're bringing are driving up quality, and that it's not us certifying that, it's an independent body. So it's transparent, it's clear, and we're driving up standards and focusing on quality all the way down the line.
Charles, how are we going to monitor this?
Basically, the plan is at the moment, and again, I'm willing to take questions, feedback from any member, be they my party or the opposition on this, but the plan is at the moment that I obviously to produce a short report every month to 6 weeks, basically detailing these changes as they go through. I meet basically the DAS at least once a week, and key focus of my meetings with him will be what's happening, where are we up to, are we on time, is it working? And if it's not working, what are we going to do about it?
Harry, the Public Rights Way Improvement Plan, page 23.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this is to seek executive approval to publish the draft Rights of Way Improvement Plan 2020-2030. The last one was done in 2010, so this is going to be an update on the 2010. It has to be done every 10 years. The process itself, it's purely a consultation. It starts around about the 4th of July for 12 weeks, and there will be sufficient exposure to this, and it is a plan. It is a proposed plan, and some of the public rights of way have not been discussed yet with the owners of the land. So they are draft indeed. So tonight I'm purely asking for the executive to approve the consultation.
Any questions? You are allowed to ask questions. Yeah. No?
Thank you. Just a point. On page 25, point number 4, access for all, it says develop accessible paths and improve structures to cater for all users with restricted mobility. But then if you turn over, one of the groups noted to approach directly for their comments. Point 4 down is locally visually impaired user groups. I'd like to thank you for putting that in there after our discussions, because I think it's really important that we try and get more residents who are visually impaired to be able to access our new pathways and footways, etc., so that they have a more healthy lifestyle wherever possible. So thank you very much for taking on board those comments.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
Just wanted to ask when you expect this consultation to report.
The consultation. The consultation starts 4th of July, and we hope to publicise that in the public notices section in the local newspapers. One is sitting over there, not the paper, but the editor. So the idea is to actually do this via the local press, and there will be a small cost to it, and that's primarily for the advertising cost.
Yes, before I start, just one slight amend where it says the examination documentation to the Director of Corporate Services in consultation with the lead member for Business, Economic Development, Strategic Planning. Because this was partially written when Stuart was in charge, it's now falls under my remit, so it should say lead member for Planning and Enforcement. But I have to say, I'm very impressed with this, and my team in Hurst, and we're trying to produce our local neighbourhood plan at the moment, very envious, especially of your website and the great work that you've done. So what this is to do, and asking permission to approve a 6-week consultation, part 2 of that is agrees to appoint an examiner to independently examine the neighbourhood plan. It's as simple as that. If you've had a look through it, you'll know how thorough this is, and I think it's a great document, and I would firmly endorse it.
Yes, thank you. So Wayne, after this, what happens next? Does this have to go to the referendum after it's completed?
Eventually.
Thank you, John. Yeah, the purpose of this really is to just acknowledge that we're putting in a formal response to the Berkshire Local Industrial Strategy consultation. It's a fairly hefty document. We had the Chief Executive of the LEP come to brief certainly our members, and I think you had a personal briefing with him yourself earlier in the week, John. So really this is the process that we've done quite well out of in the past. I think we've got in excess of 70 million out of the 180 million that was available for the whole of Berkshire, mostly on roads and such. So this is a continuation and in a different guise, really, based on an industrial strategy, but it's a growth deal, the growth deal part 2. and I would endorse this as something that we should certainly get behind and just say, fine, carry on, let's do it. But whether we'll get the government this autumn, which is when they're supposed to start getting reactive on this, I'm not sure that this will be bubbling up to the priority list, but it is continuing in the background. Happy to take any questions.
Not really a question, but this is really the hook that we put all of our funding from central government will come down to us eventually. The good news is that central government want to fast track us, hopefully, fingers crossed, and so that our strategy Bliss document will be one of the first in the UK. So hopefully, rather than it being early 2020, as is noted on page 128, it should be hopefully autumn. So that's really good news for us. So once EU funding has dissipated, if there is a new set of funding from central government, we'll be in a good position to start bidding for it.
Stuart, I'm in full support of this. I just want to raise one point. So on page 174, it says the council would like to see more emphasis on climate change and environmental sustainability issues in the framework. As part of my new responsibility, I'd like to make sure that we as a council body do ensure that the emphasis is put on climate change and environmental sustainability issues, and that any money funding that is handed down is done so on a condition of there being an element of climate change and environmental sustainability responsibility.
Absolutely, and you'll see if you look through those, some of our responses, it's repeated quite a lot of the way through the document, certainly, definitely will.
I just to comment back on that, that very much has been picked up by the LEP, and I'm sure that you'll see that that's reflected in the piece coming back in autumn.
I'd just like to thank Stuart for picking up my point about the issues that we have about the London waiting zone not covering Wokingham, and therefore it making it very difficult for people such as the police to recruit in this area in comparison with inner London, and also areas as far out as Bracknell who have some advantages over us in terms of the amount they can pay.
Thank you all for staying for so long, and thank you all for coming, and good night.